Hey guys, I'm Erin and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. This is a new 2021 release. I believe it came out at the beginning of February, and it is a sci-fi thriller novel where we follow Evelyn, who is a scientist whose life work has been working in cloning. And she has left her husband because he was cheating on her, and discovers that the mistress is a clone of her. And so he had created a clone of Evelyn named Martine, and Martine was his attempt at fixing the flaws in Evelyn or the things that he thought were flaws and things that bothered him, and kind of engineered this new woman that still looked like Evelyn but was an improvement in his mind, and then left Evelyn to be with this new and improved Evelyn 2.0, essentially named Martine. And at the beginning of the book, Martine calls Evelyn because the husband, Nathan, has died and she doesn't know what to do. And so Evelyn decides to help Martine kind of cover up this crime, because for Evelyn, she can't let it be found out, because if the authorities find out about Martine, they'll investigate her and it will kind of ruin her life's work that she just got this huge award for, because the way Nathan had used the cloning technology to make this new and improved spouse is absolutely not what Evelyn was doing this research for. That's not an intended purpose at all. He did it without Evelyn knowing. That's not what she's being marketing this new technology to be used for, and so she doesn't want to get shut down. So one thing that, first off, I want to talk about this book was the science and cloning side was really interesting. In kind of Evelyn being afraid of people finding out that Martine exists is both her, one, just wanting to protect herself and her work, but also she talks a little bit about some of the kind of ethical questions around it. There's a reason she isn't marketing the clones for this reason, and part of it is the ethics of creating a better version of someone. What she's been marketing this technology for has been more like creating temporary body doubles for politicians or something. A clone that they can send out in case if there's worry of assassination or something, and then use it just for a short period of time before retiring it. It's not supposed to be a long-term clone used for anything. And so there's definitely a little bit of talk kind of the ethics of that, which is definitely an interesting kind of thought topic for a reader, is thinking at what, in your opinion, at what point is cloning, can it be used in an ethical reason, and at what point does it become unethical to use? I think that was interesting kind of thing to think about. As well, I can't say I've really spent much time at all thinking about how you would go about cloning someone, but the way Sarah Gailey does the cloning process in this book was definitely not what I would have thought of, and it was really interesting, just kind of the process of growing this human. And they talk about how they make sure after they've grown this blank slate human, how they kind of acclimate this new person to show the different kind of scars that the original person has, stuff that didn't just happen naturally as part of a human being growing and evolving, things that were results of accidents, and scars, broken bones that didn't heal all the way, those kinds of things. And so the process of getting these clones kind of fine-tuned was really interesting. Also kind of gory, so if you're not really into hearing about that, it doesn't go into super in-depth at the way they do this, but it does talk about it, so kind of depending on your squeamish levels, maybe be wary of that. I was fine with it, but understand how everyone could be. And so I thought that science was really interesting, and I think Sarah Gailey did a really good job describing all this science and tech stuff in language that conveyed a thought out and something that felt like it could be real science, but without making the reader, in my opinion, feel like they were reading a science textbook on it. So that's something I'm definitely wary of when picking up science fiction, is I never want to feel like I'm reading a science textbook. I did that enough in college, and I think that was done really well on the science side of this. The aspect of this book I thought that Sarah Gailey did the best, and I think, or at least was the most thought-provoking, well-done part, was the relationship between Evelyn and her clone Martine. It was a really interesting kind of thought experiment to have all of Evelyn's inner thoughts about her reaction to the fact that Martine exists, which kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about this question of using cloning ethically, as well as kind of her self-preservation and selfishness and just not wanting her work to be dismantled if it got found out. But also a lot of what we saw in Evelyn's thoughts was her reaction to what Nathan considered the better version of her. And so you know, like what things got changed. You see her kind of reflecting sometimes on the way Martine acts. And it was really interesting because I think it would have been easy for an author to do this kind of reaction and have it be a lot of self-deprecating and how this other person is better, but it was really not that at all. It was a lot of the things Nathan changed in Martine, Evelyn looked down on. It was like the fact that she's doing this shows that she's weak. One thing especially was Evelyn does not apologize. Like that's like one of her life philosophies that her dad kind of beat into her mind was you don't apologize for things. And so kind of seeing her react when when Martine would do these things was really quite interesting. And I think having Evelyn react in these ways, these looking down on some of these behavior changing, was a really interesting way to give depth to her character. It really showed you the ways Evelyn was self-confident in herself, and instead of being oh, I'm not good enough for this man, who will I ever be good enough for, it was no, this is a bad trait, like this change trait is now bad. And it was definitely, I thought, a very interesting way to give depth to Evelyn and really kind of what her life philosophies are for her behaviors and actions. And I really quite enjoyed that. It was kind of like a pseudo mini therapy session in her head a lot, and it was really enjoyable to read. But then in amidst all of this, Evelyn kind of highlighting what she considers the weak parts of Martine that were changed from her, you see the parts of Martine that haven't been changed kind of creep up here and there a lot when they're working together as like partners in crime in the plot side of this, really the hiding the crime with Nathan's death. And every so often Martine will really get into like the researching of something or offer really well thought out ideas, and it was almost like Evelyn was like had kind of forgotten they were the same person at their base level. And it was like a nice reminder to be like, oh yeah, this person is my clone. Despite all these differences that I'm looking down on, she does still have these things that make her a really good partner. And so kind of seeing that evolution of Evelyn pushing back on wanting to even speak to Martine, to becoming reluctant partners, to kind of seeing the good in Martine, and really just kind of, it's like an interesting, like, what, like if you partner with yourself and you can harness all the, like, because Evelyn's like a renowned celebrated scientist. If you think of something you're good at, and if you think what it'd be like to work on that work or hobby or something with a clone of yourself who has those same attributes that make you so good at this, and it's just like this interesting dynamic that she kind of started harnessing, as well as you really see Evelyn's kind of coming to terms with this creature who's her, but she's still kind of a child in many ways because she's not been in the world very long, and she didn't learn things the way kids do learning up. And so Evelyn really kind of also taking this pseudo motherly role with Martine, and you just see this very much development of the relationship from this beginning to kind of where they end up at the end, where they're much more willing partners in how the book ends. And I won't spoil the actual ending, but kind of way the relationship ends up was one thing I did think was interesting about the end. And so I think that's what this book really excelled in, was just their relationship and how it grows and how they work and clash and go well together. Really well done, in my opinion. And the one thing that kind of fell a little bit for me, which is why this book was rated ultimately a 4 stars instead of the 5 it kind of started out and was mostly being, was I just didn't love the end. It was just an odd ending. I liked aspects of it, as I mentioned. I really liked where Evelyn and Martine's relationship ended with the ending, but the other parts of the ending, I'll say spoilers here for just like 30 seconds, but Nathan created Martine to be to be his baby mama, right? Like, that's what would happen. He wanted someone who would give birth because Evelyn didn't want children. And then she gives birth and she has this child. And then when Evelyn takes Martine away from him and he's left with this child, that's where I kind of thought it should have ended, with him having this child he wanted so badly. But then he ends up thrusting the child onto Evelyn. And so what I did like was the way Evelyn and Martine kind of raised this child together without Nathan knowing. Like, I liked their side of it, but I thought it was like so dumb. I was like did not like that he just got out of this like scot-free. Like, he went through this whole process of creating this clone in secret and then leaving his wife for her to get her pregnant, and then he was just like, oh well, JK. Not a big fan of that part of the ending. So anyways, into spoilers. But overall, I definitely recommend this. This is a sci-fi I really enjoyed, especially if you like thriller elements. It's a really good blend of both, in my opinion. This is the second book I've read by Sarah Gailey, the first being Upright Women Wanted, and I've quite enjoyed both things I've read by them, and so I'm definitely looking forward to reading more by this author. So if you've read anything else by this author, let me know what I should pick up next, or if you've read this book, let me know what your thoughts are on it, and I will see you in my next video.